Do I need to ping David? I think you've seen the demo already, Frederick, and I did a personal one to Tom, and Ed was at the talk, obviously, with me. So I don't think I need to do the demo again. We'll see if David needs it. I'm gonna open the document.
By the way, something I think might be interesting to share with all of you. So we had something interesting that happened last week where we had like a performance regression, and it like showed like the kind of flow through all the signals kind of worked extremely perfectly in our case there, where we had like, we deployed something, we had an increase in latency, which alerted us. We went to logs, found a trace ID from that, used the trace ID to look at Jaeger, and from Jaeger, we could find the exact instance where something was spending a lot of time, right? And then we used that time and the instance to call profile in conprof, and actually find the exact spot, like within 2 minutes, nice, where the performance regression had happened. Nice. was pretty cool. I think we're probably going to schedule a blog post about this and kind of share with everyone. Awesome. But yeah, thought it's cool to share.
Are you using the the link for the trace, with the derived field?
No, actually, long story short, it was just kubectl logs that we were using there.
Okay. I don't know, David doesn't reply. Should we still go ahead?
Yeah, let's start with them.
Okay. So I think the first big subject around this document, so I think everyone reviewed the document, is about the syntax itself. So there is in the proposal, I'm suggesting the pipe syntax, but I think Tom had the idea that maybe supporting the two could be a way to make everyone happy. So I like to do a quick round table about this specific subject before we move to the other one. Tom, you want to start?
Yeah, I guess like the trade-off here is your arguments for the pipe syntax are it's more natural for log processing, and that's what people are used to doing on the command line, like with pipe and grep and so on. And the arguments for the nested brackets are it's more in line with what Prometheus does, and you know, and therefore less to learn if you're already familiar with Prometheus. Does that summarize the argument, you think?
Yeah. What I'm wondering also is if we do the function, do we have to do the function for the current filter that we have? Like we have the pipe equal and the pipe tilde. Do we have to also support? Like, are we going full on function style?
I mean, I'm just trying to understand the trade-offs between the two approaches at the moment. Like, I'm not suggesting what we should do.
Yeah, but that's the pro and con. Yeah, one of the big. Yeah.
But go on.
I was about to say that one of the big con for the function is you have to find the parenthesis when you close the parenthesis, which usually you write a regex at the end, and then after you have to come back and find the closing parenthesis. It's not that big deal, but still it's prone to error.
So I think the challenge is also, I mean, if you, so the challenge with the pipelines, once you get to kind of very complicated expressions, is like it's really not clear like how you would do binary operations in a pipeline, right? You would end up having to bracket things anyway.
Yeah.
In which case it starts to look like the Prometheus expressions. I 100% agree. Like in the Prometheus world, matching brackets is a pain in the friggin' ass, especially on large queries. these both seem like decent points to me. Like,
Yeah.
Do you think, David, for you just joined, right? We're pipes versus brackets, basically, is what we're discussing.
Yeah.
Have you seen the examples of the two syntax? The argument for pipes being that that's what you're used to doing on the command line, and brackets being that's what Prometheus does, and we're trying to stay close to Prometheus.
I mean, we had that argument before, and my point always was that the pipes are also more common now in other log-based query languages. So I think that might make that easier a bit if someone wants to move over.
Yeah, I'm not particularly interested in Amazon does it this way, or because it's like, so what? Like, the there's value in being close to Prometheus, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would question that from a user point of view. There's maybe a point where you also perceive Loki a bit more as a drop-in replacement for some other logging solution that you have, and then the sort of the Prometheus-isms is they stand a bit in the way, right? So it's kind of like, do we want to embrace the sort of early crowd now, who like obviously know Prometheus well and know all the background on why the things are the way they are, or do we want to be a bit more forward looking and say, like, this is ultimately a logging query language, maybe we should look at other logging query languages?
I mean, but I can show you other logging query languages that have brackets. Like, I don't think we should necessarily use the fact that other people do it this way as an argument to do it that way. Like, we shouldn't cargo cult how to build the language. Like, we should look at, like, if we want to be like AWS's CloudWatch logs, then we should look at what's powerful in doing it in their language, what's easy to do in their language that isn't easy to do in ours. Not that they just do it that way. And, like, to be clear, my argument for Prometheus isn't just Prometheus does it that way. It's that the familiarity means you'll have to learn less, means we can, effectively try and map one-to-one between Prometheus and Loki, and hopefully people who are already very familiar with Prometheus should be very familiar with Loki. Like, that doesn't work for CloudWatch, right? Because, like, we're not trying to map one-to-one with CloudWatch. And I don't think you're
I understand.
The opposite would be true in that way then as well, right? Like, if there are people who are learning Loki first and it is close to Prometheus, then it's also easier to learn Prometheus that way, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's where David was coming from, as I understand, right? Like, if you're just starting to learn this, then it should work the other way around as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's difficult.
Yes.
The problem with doing the two is the documentation. Like, I think it's going to be difficult to document properly that there will be two syntax. But maybe I'm wrong. But I do like, this is new, the binary. This is something new that you brought today. Although I think it can be easily solved with a parenthesis. But this is true that binary operation may look a bit weird. And we may have to force parentheses on the top of the whole pipeline if we do pipeline.
And if that's the case, then they're not truly equivalent anymore, right? Or I guess they could be, but then if you start mixing it, then why?
Why you will just wrap them?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, I think there's a couple of use cases here where, like, from an ad hoc query standpoint, I think the pipe syntax is a lot more fluid. Like, normally I'm just writing out a query and I want to manipulate it more. And, like, this is what I do from a CLI, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, from alerting and binary operations and sort of more elaborate examples, that's where the function syntax, it's like, it's sort of write once and reuse, in an alert or something like that, or you have a query you save, or it's ad hoc. They both, I think, I don't know, there's pros and cons. This maybe why supporting both makes sense, because, writing an alert rule around a chain of pipes and things might look, obviously less, or might look goofier or harder to read than a properly, like, line separated and indented function syntax.
I mean, you'd have to support multi-line pipes, right?
Yeah.
What's David? What's your take on Flux? Like, because that went with pipe syntax.
It did. The big problem there was that the filtering was difficult, where you had to name, because with Flux is like basically table modifications, and to filter something you had to reference a field or like a certain column and then say a filter for that one, and that just made those filter expressions really annoying. I think if that hadn't been there, these pipes, I think they made a lot of sense. And I heard some good feedback from other people that writing Flux queries is quite easy. It's this like base case of filtering for a certain column in a table that was made difficult, and that was really frustrating.
And I mean, the reason I'm keen, like, I'm not keen to jump to an answer to this question, to be clear, because we're going to have to live with whatever we decide here for years, right? So the other pro pipes use case is actually in the metric space, is Graphite, right? Like the way the Graphite experience in Grafana works is effectively stacking, select some queries and then aggregate them and then, do other stuff. Like you effectively stack up a pipe. And for instance,
I mean, it's more like an SQL expression, right? So if you, it's kind of difficult to say, it's kind of difficult to kind of use the graphical editor as the basis for like a conclusion here, because that's like a simplification on top. Like it's like the equivalent of syntactic sugar, right?
Mm.
I'm kind of write SQL anyway, or like the Graphite query language.
I think we're, irrespective of what we decide, we're going to end up building a graphical query editor following that kind of model. Like select the metrics, select some filters, select some aggregations, and select some group bys. Like we're going to end up building that for Prometheus and for Loki.
That's absolutely true. And that in that regards, maybe the decision that we want to make here is not even that important. But
well, I mean, and both of these proposals on the table are equivalent, right? Like the choice is one of style almost, right?
Yeah.
Because whilst yes, I agree with like binary operations can be easier in a bracketed language, I don't think it's necessarily easier. It's just you're more used to using brackets. Whereas in a pipeline language, you might not be used to using brackets, and you would have to potentially use them for a binary operation.
Yeah. If we go with the supporting both bracket and pipe, should we also support like the current count over time and rate as pipe at the end that we don't currently?
I mean, so let's explore it. What would it mean to support both?
Well, it will mean that you can. I don't know if you can mix the two, but at least you can do everything with only pipe or do everything with only bracket. At least that will be what I expect if we do both of them. I don't think mixing sounds like a good idea, but at least being able to do the rate that we can't currently as a pipe, we should be able to do it.
The language as it stands effectively supports mixing, right?
Currently, yes.
And we can't make breaking changes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So that means we will have to mix, although being able to mix the two.
So I think given the language already supports the filters on the log line as a pipeline, but functions some aggregation as a function, I think it's actually relatively natural to do both. But okay. I can see how like maybe I'm the outlier there. Does everyone understand what we mean when we're proposing doing both?
Yeah. No, I'm also thinking. Yeah. No. To me, this sort of the piping syntax just makes a lot more sense, and I don't have to go chase parentheses. But at the same time, it yeah, I mean, to the experienced user, it might feel more natural to just go start typing rate parentheses open. Yeah, I don't think we'll. I had another question before. Like, do we know any case where where the pipe syntax would, that wouldn't work right now? I mean, you mentioned binary operations, but maybe that can be solved with parentheses. Was there anything else?
I mean, honestly, I think they're equivalent. Like, I don't think there's any case where one works and the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm even questioning whether the function style versus pipelining is actually that much more familiar. Like, I think the keywords is much more what convinces me that I know what this is going to do rather than the syntax of how I use those. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I pipe and rate, I know Prometheus before, I still understand what that's going to do, even if the syntax isn't exactly the same.
Yeah. So what about the first operator? I'm going to jump to another subject. The first operator that we want to do is the regex. And I choose the word regex with a P as expression. What do you think about this?
Honestly, what do other query languages do? I think that's. I
don't know.
I know Tom hates this argument, but I think from a user point of view, we're helping everyone out if we're staying somehow within the realm of expectations on how this thing works.
What does the P stand for?
Question?
No,
I would.
It's just whether you call it a regex or a regex expression, right? Whether you.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I don't particularly this is what you call a function is not a meaningful, is not a particularly interesting question. I don't really mind. We're just going to call it what we call it. Prometheus doesn't have an equivalent.
Yeah.
I think Go tries to call them regex with a P, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Python doesn't have a P, whatever. Right.
Yeah, I think it's even. I think that it's probably evenly distributed across languages as well. I think both exist in various places.
All right.
I think this is just a matter of flipping a coin. Really, it doesn't really matter.
I mean, I would still like to emphasize that maybe we should look at our target market and look at how Splunk, which keyword Splunk uses, and then just use that one. I do have another question. Maybe we can step back because Tom brought something up with the flux that was indeed annoying, which is that the order of some things mattered. Even some pipe functions could only be in certain positions, and otherwise the thing exploded. And I guess we do have a similar thing already in Prometheus, where it's first rate, then aggregate, right? So maybe the user has to be educated. But if we can avoid somehow being too strict about it.
So this was my argument for kind of keeping piping for just filtering essentially.
Yeah.
As soon as you go into functions, you break from just filtering into doing calculations, basically.
Yeah.
It's clear where you're changing from one to the other.
So when you work with logs, you will allow filtering pipe, and then when you work with metrics, you start doing function.
Yeah, exactly. That was the comment in a nutshell that I wrote onto the document.
Okay.
I guess the tricky thing there is when you're filtering on derived data, right, on derived labels, when you're extracting effectively a label out of an entry and doing a filter on that, what does that syntax look like in both cases, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And then also, like, is this is then the way to write queries, like, can this have significant performance boosts, right? Like the way you order these things.
Yes.
Like not just semantically. I think that was the case with Flux also.
I think what Tom was saying also was like, so if you've now extracted a value and you want to filter on that again, do you then introduce pipes again in the middle? That would be awkward, I think. Is that kind of what you were saying, Tom? Or
I mean, it's I was never particularly happy with there being two ways of doing filtering with the original proposal, right? One was you can select streams based on labels, and then you have a separate filter keyword that like is for handling this new third type, which was a record or something, right? I don't think the third type is necessary. And I don't like that it has a separate set of syntax for handling it. I feel like it'd be a more minimal change and a smaller surface area to the language. And these are things I care about, right? Surface area and size of change. If the JSON and the regex pipeline stages or functions, whatever we want to call them, were to extract labels and values into labels and values, not into a new record type.
Yeah.
So that's something I feel pretty strongly about. But then the question becomes, how do you filter on this? How do you select some streams with a selector, pipe it through JSON to turn all those fields into labels, and then how do you filter on those again?
Yeah, that's something that I removed from the original code, but it's probably the next improvement that's going to come. And it's exactly that. It's you extracted new labels, but you now need to filter on them. And this is like a real use case that all users have. The biggest example is the path. Like you have an Nginx path, and you want to select only the path that is this one, right? So actually, this one is very easy to do with just the filtering. But the JSON one is a bit more difficult to do with just filterings.
So that's one I'm a little bit interested in. I don't mind. I quite like the idea of the minute you switch to handling metrics that it's all bracketed, because that's kind of what we do already, right? That would be persisting with the language as it stands. And so I could get behind that.
Yeah, I'm also not opposed to having a different mechanism for these second order filters. Like SQL had a different keyword for this, right? You have a where clause, and then when you group by, you have a having clause. They just clearly separated.
Yeah, I mean, and do you think most beginners or even medium experts in SQL could explain the difference between having and where clauses? That is a terrible frigging example, David. Great counter example.
Maybe.
So would you say that it's weird that the filtering after on the extracted label is not a function, or is it fine if it's a pipe? Which one you will prefer in that case? Because you haven't really created metric yet. If we say the example that you have regex and then after it's a filtering on a label extracted, it's not yet metric. You still need to sum or count on top of it to make it a metric.
I think if we went with filtering is done with pipes and maths is done with functions. If we went with that rule, then this would have to be part of the pipe operations. It's more like I didn't like the actual fact that we had a separate filtering syntax from our label matching syntax. I feel like they should be the same.
Yeah, but it's a bit weird that you have to come back to the beginning and start Like you extracted the path, and then you have to come back to the label part and
No,
write a new.
that's also not what I'm suggesting, right? I'm not suggesting, because that makes no sense, right? That is weird indeed. But like, for instance, how bad would it be if we let me just share a screen for some examples.
Yeah.
I mean, if to the user this was like completely transparent, that like in some places the pipe would mean the filter on the derived fields, and we can sort of detect this safely, I think that would be a good way forward.
I don't like magic. I don't want the behavior of things to be dependent on their context.
Okay.
I feel like that leads to, you can't ask questions like what does this do, because you have to ask, well, in what context?
Yeah, I mean, but this was after your having comment, right? So let's go the other way.
No. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I 100% agree with you. I'm saying like.
But I think it's important to take into account this, next case that we're gonna have to handle, which is filtering on new extracted data, because this is for sure coming.
This would be this is kind of what we've suggested so far, right? Which is where, assuming this is in log format, this would then take the value from each line and replace it with the field called duration. Extract log format data into labels and values. Yeah. Then the question becomes, maybe we do this. Well, actually, let's just do this.
Yeah, so to the question, where will it be faster if you start filtering before? Yes, it will be, because you have to serialize less log if you filter before.
Right, but before we, so like this to me seems weird, because that's a selector, right?
Yeah.
And so this seems weird, basically. Your suggestion was, I believe.
Yeah, that's yes.
I don't know. I don't mind the second label selector, but I think in your example you'd have to have a log format that's extracting level, though, right?
I mean, for me, what's important here is to really make clear that the first one is on the index, the second one is on data from the log line. I think it's very important to understand that.
So the two things going on in my head, right, is one is I don't like a different way of filtering your logs to the first way. But the reason I don't like the second one, which is by using the same method, is that that method becomes context sensitive.
Yeah.
I also doubt that that the user kind of makes that jump that, okay, this is now like a level, this is now like a label filter. It's I think for the user this stuff is not important. And
right. Are you saying that the difference is not important, or that?
I'm saying we're trying to align it with the label selector, because to us a derived label is still a label, but to the user, I think that might be a completely different concept in their head.
I think it's incredibly important that the user understands a derived label as a label. The reason is, if we do,
but we're not operating on the index anymore, and that's
but you can explode the engine depending on the label that you're choosing. Even if you have high cardinality.
That sounds like a problem worth solving, though.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's incredibly important, assuming that foo doesn't have level in its existing set of labels. It's incredibly important we be able to solve this kind of problem, right?
Yes.
And these here are defined as being label names, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what leads me down that this has to put labels and values in the existing data model for the rest of the maths to work, right? But then that still leaves the question: what, this kind of, maybe we get rid of the pipe there. Maybe that makes more sense because suddenly this almost matches a metric name. Or maybe we make the filters part of the extraction, and their key value.
Do we really need anything? Like, why do we do the value equals duration? Why do we want to be able to set multiple like rewrites, I guess, or something? Or like, why couldn't it just be duration here?
Oh yeah, I think you're just suggesting this, are you?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it. Otherwise, we could make these completely separate as well and just say just log FMT, and then you do the next filtering from there.
Yeah, it's because you have to select
you
have to select which property will become the sample value. That's
right,
why we have like value equal.
But it only becomes important at the point where you actually switch into metrics.
That's true. Yes, that's true.
So let's. I agree. So let's remove it because it's orthogonal. Then, like, the question becomes: should the filter be a filter on the? I like the idea that it's not, right? Because I like the idea that log format is an atom, like JSON, like regex, right? It would look weird if that was regex and it specified both the regex and a filter. So I think this makes sense. This is a note.
I mean, the interesting question is, can there be other functions that can produce labels with the same name, and then you have a sort of preference?
I think there should be like label join and label replace functions like in Prometheus. It's important to get matches right.
But like, for example, what if the log format has a message field, and in there is a giant JSON blob, and then I want to extract another field there into a label?
I mean, that's definitely what we want to support that use case.
Yeah.
Your nope though. So for like something like JSON, I don't think you want to just convert. Like, I think you'd want to be able to do like JQ does, right? Which is write a whole sort of query in there to get fields out of the JSON.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, this is saying this is a filter, right?
Yeah.
It's
you're just saying.
Yeah. No, I got you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're saying, I mean, another reason not to do that, right? Is just what is it? It's confusing.
Yeah.
You're saying like this, right? Foo equals JSON flip.flop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying like that, right? Where you extract that field into that label.
Yep.
Yeah, I think renaming is important in case you have clashes and you want to rename them between the label that already exists. You don't want to override it. You want to maybe rename it.
I feel like this should be a separate step, though. Like the renaming should be a separate thing, though. And if you have this, then you could do something similar to the conflict resolution that Prometheus does with exported or something.
Okay.
The tricky bit will be there are things allowed in JSON paths. You're basically talking about flattening out JSON objects into single level dictionaries. Yeah. And I feel like JSON is a special case because it allows a lot more structure than our labels ever will. Ones if there's a list in this, how will we flatten out lists in JSON in any kind of way that's remotely desirable?
You have to either join the list or pick one in the list, which the language support. Like JSON, Gmesh path support that, and GQ support that too. But I don't think it's like one of the big use case where you want to flatten an array to use as a label. I don't think anyone's going to use that much.
I know, but the interesting one here is you're definitely going to want to, in the JSON case, you are going to want to conflate, because you're going to want to do things like, if this is a member of this array, then filter it.
Yeah, that's part of the GQ language or Gmesh language. I think it does it, but it's a filter. It's not anymore like an extraction.
Exactly, yeah. So I wonder whether filters being part of the extraction function is back on the table.
Okay.
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah, it is. There's one thing I wanted to say about the regex, because in the POC, in the proof of concept that I did, this is something that I realized it's atrociously slow. And there's nothing that's going to save us. There's no trick that's going to save us on that part. And I expect people to switch to something else than regex as soon as they have a lot of logs. Like it's a good way to start, but at some point it falls very short in terms of efficiency.
What falls short in terms of efficiency, sorry? The
regex. Currently, the operator regex.
Right. So?
No, I'm saying that it's good to have alternative than the regex, not having just regex.
I see. Yeah, no, we definitely want alternatives other than just regex. Not just only because regex is a pain in the ass to write.
Yeah.
So did we just backtracking on pipes versus functions? Did we reach a conclusion? Use pipes for log operations, which is filtering basically.
So far. Yeah, passing, yeah.
Use functions for metric.
Which are aggregation.
Is that like, because if we did, then this whole hour was already worth it.
It seems reasonable to me. I'll have to think about where it wouldn't work, but yeah.
Yeah, this is just a straw man for now.
It still kind of leaves the question open of which part the actual extraction happens in, right? Like, does it mean it's the last thing that you do in a pipe, or is it the first thing you do with a function?
Currently, as I did it, it's the first metric function that does the creation of the metric.
Yeah, because if it's going to be consistent with how we use rate, then you would expect the, use label as value would be a function, not a pipeline step.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I just want to make sure that it's been.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only 2 of them right now, right? Or 3, right? Increase rate.
Yeah, I added 2 last week.
Label as value. Name intentionally verbose so that someone proposes a better name. That I actually feel like that's something you could explain to users. And I feel like it's a principle that they could understand and get and make sense. Yeah,
and we can refer to Prometheus documentation by saying, as soon as you start using rate, then you can apply all the operator that Prometheus has for over label aggregation.
How do you feel about that, David?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I'm still always keen to kind of send people over to the Prometheus page, but rather kind of like have all the reference documentation at ours. But it's good to like be compliant, so to say.
I think that's fair.
I mean, as soon as you start doing a rate, then you're in Prometheus land. A lot of people will feel happy about that. They don't have to, they're working with metric. They don't have to relearn something new, which is a big plus. I think it's easy to say if you,
Should we do a sanity check with those? Because I feel like in the design doc there were a couple of reference use cases, and maybe we should or maybe not like all together now, but maybe someone should check out if this all still makes sense for those.
Yeah, definitely Cyril should later.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, there's two design doc, by the way, David. There's one which is way too many use cases, and there's one that is I scoped down everything, which is the Google Doc.
Cool. And I'm still keen on the combination of log format and JSON.
Yeah, I understand what. Yeah.
Extract a message first, and then parse that with JSON.
Let's just write some of this shit down, sorry. But we don't know how to filter based on secondary expressions, so I've got a rubber duck in my hand. Drop my rubber duck. That's if you hear an errant squeak. So, and we didn't get to where. But you want to know, how do we do a second? How do we extract an extracted? How do we do another extraction? A second layer of extraction?
Yeah.
Yeah,
how do we extract a JSON field from a log format field?
Yeah, this is a point that has come out in the first PR that I did. Someone was asking, like, I need to do a first JSON and then after regex on top of it. I think it's you, Frederick, no? Who said that? Or Bartek said that.
I think it was Bartek, but
yeah,
I think this is a difficult one. Also, like, where do you start erroring on these kinds of things, and where do you not? Like, where is it just skip over it when it doesn't exist, versus failing the query and so on?
Yeah, you got to fail the query, haven't you? Because like emitting errors silently is.
Yeah.
So David, just so I assume, like you wanna, that's what you mean, right?
Yep, yeah, that is exactly what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we need to tackle is binary operations, right? Just to make sure that we have those.
Like, I can give you a very concrete example where it's going to be difficult to do something like this. Like, Kubernetes is going to start introducing like references to objects as a nested thing. And some objects are namespaced and some are not. So while they all will have the ref object or something like that in their log line, some will have a namespace, some won't. And it will be from the same log stream.
Yeah. This is the same as currently, what do we do if the regex doesn't match?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Currently, in my implementation, what I did is I'm actually filtering out the line. I know that there's I know that Tom prefer to actually errors in that specific case, but I feel like what can the user do? You know, like if he has
Right, we're both talking about two different problems now, right? What do we do on failure is different from the secondary layer of extraction.
Yeah.
So which one would you like to talk about?
Is there a problem with the secondary layer of extraction? I mean, I feel like with pipes,
we don't know how to do it yet. Like, this is just one suggestion.
Yeah.
Right. One suggestion would be you have a way of assigning the, an entry has a value, right? Has a timestamp and a value and labels. And a stream is a stream has labels, an entry is a timestamp and a value, and the value is string, right? So one way to do it would be to tell log format that the new value of that entry is this field.
Yeah.
Another way to do it would be the same way we were kind of treating the use label as value function, and you could use label as value message.
The question is there a legitimate use case where you would want to do this on different nested objects, let's say?
What, within a single
Yeah,
I mean, imagine if there was two messages, both clean JSON, you want to filter on one and the other, or even worse, conditionally filter one based on the other.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do that in Prometheus, right? You can't query, you can't conditionally select a metric based on the value of one label, like in another label. how would you do that you can do that in SQL, can't you? You can reference fields in matches for other fields.
I mean, like the question really becomes, is it something that we would want even, right?
Yeah, you kind of need.
It's start to be too much now.
That's a feeling I'm getting as well, but helps to be explicit about it, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like you want an SQL database when you start doing things like this.
Do we have
I agree.
like a union operator?
No, there is in the design the ability to merge streams, which is necessary for various reasons.
Well, you kind of do that here, right? You could basically have a selector where you select from the one JSON and then you union that with the same stream where you have the selector against the other JSON and get an output stream that's the sum of both.
I feel like we don't want to solve those problems.
Yeah.
No.
At this iteration of the language.
Yeah.
Well, if we do, maybe
I
later.
disagree. Yeah.
So, David, you posed the question. What do you think to these two potential solutions?
Maybe a question here. When you wrote use label as value here, do you mean the same use label as value as you used previously in the document?
I mean, it would have to be a different function because I don't like the function one. Its signature would be poorly defined, right? In one context, its signature would be stream to metric, and in its other, it would be stream to stream.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to.
Yes. I personally, in my first design, I call that template, being able to rewrite the original logline.
I mean, that is a more generic problem, right? Rewriting the logline with contents of the labels.
Yeah, well, it could be just one label.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This sounds like roughly like a label replaced in Prometheus.
But label replaced is only ever used to rename labels, except for you have to go through the whole rigmarole of writing a regular expression that matches everything.
Yeah. I've actually recently seen internal users preferring label join over.
Yeah, we do that now, yeah. Where you have to provide an empty field to say the value. Yeah. It's like both, it should just be frigging called label rename, or even better, join, and all the binary operations should take foo equals bars.
I think there's an open issue still that Fabian opened to do this.
Okay, we're getting a bit sidetracked here. I still think the first one is, to me, more intuitive also, and it keeps the renaming local, which means if I look at the second line, the damage might already be done. That message was like overriding a different message field. Is that not true?
I don't follow, David.
We had the proposal like 2 lines above that we could do conflict resolution like Prometheus does with exported. We didn't actually discuss it that much, but that could be a solution to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by default, it will replace the logline. That's what you're saying, but you could replace another label with the third option.
Okay. Oh, I think I'm misunderstanding this argument. Then what is value equals message? What is that going to do?
This is telling log format to take the message field, and put it in the value of the entries it emits. So this is the value of an entry, right?
Yeah.
and the entry also has a timestamp. And so log format on its own takes all of these labels and puts them into labels and doesn't touch the value. So the value at this point is still going to be the same as the value at this point.
Okay.
Whereas this tells it to modify the value, and this is a separate step that tells it to take a label and put it into the value. And this is the same, take a label and put it into the value, but allowing you to fiddle with the syntax and maybe substin.
To me,
yeah, I like.
To me, just like from an intuition point of view, this was more like let me tell you the fields I'm interested in, and here is a renaming rule. This is what this function kind of sends to
and
me.
I think we excluded this up here as well, because you know, there's going to be multiple. There's going to be log format. There's going to be JSON. There's going to be regex. Like, and we don't want each one of them to have to implement this special magic. So I think let's exclude that, which gives us these two, right?
Yeah, and the second one has another use case that is very interesting and problematic with JSON is you have a JSON, there's a message, it's unreadable if you keep it as is in Grafana currently. And being able to say that's only the JSON that I want to show in my log panel, the message, sorry, I think it has a lot of value.
I feel like, and this is going to be contentious, we should have both.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, not contentious then. Because, like, if we only had this and said, well, this covers all use cases we could ever think of, we're in that label join scenario that Prometheus has. Technically true, but also frustratingly painful.
Yeah. So the first one is syntax sugar for the second one.
Yeah, I mean, this is also going to be slow, right? Because you're going to have to
true.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Just use label as value just sounds so weird to me.
I don't think we
like an unwrap or something.
This is intentionally a placeholder name for this function.
Yeah. Okay.
So we could call this what? Unwrap.
Yeah,
we could just call it use.
Label to
We could just
value.
call it value. We could go proper 90s and do label to value, like boys to men.
There we go.
I think I kind of like unwrap.
I like the idea of so use has got to go because it's been used too many times. Value is overloaded. Like unwrap, at least like Googling Loki unwrap.
That's this point.
Yeah, like I think we'll probably win with our docs on that one, right?
Yeah.
And so we said we want we need a different version of unwrap for this up here.
So if we look at the proposal that I did with the regex, I was saying that the value label becomes automatically the sample value. I was saying that now we prefer that we have another pipe function to select which label becomes the value.
No, it's not a pipe function. It's a function. Because we said the first function, as opposed to like pipeline stage, converts to a metric. So like we want it to be consistent with rate or increase, which converts a log to a metric. But we don't have an increase, do we?
I mean,
No.
it could technically be unwrap as a function then.
Then remember the principle that really upset me to begin with was if the same word is used in two different ways with two different semantics, then how the hell do you like search for the right one?
Like you would say something like this is unwrap in a pipe or this is unwrap with parentheses.
Yeah,
right.
Like, Google that. I'm sure to be. No, that's a good point, right? Yeah, like
we're trying not to
ambiguate them.
Right? We don't want every word to have multiple meanings.
Yeah.
Can we look at an example while you where this becomes a metric? Because
so we're saying
where the value is not.
Why is it not the value function just?
This one here, right? So if we do this, and then we do
Yeah.
You know, and then we might do sum by.
Yeah, and I think just value as a function here could work actually kind of nicely.
Yeah, this is a point that I wanted to discuss. So it's not automatic. You have to select which label becomes a value. It's not the value label.
Again, we don't want it to be automatic because there's going to be log format, there's going to be JSON, there's going to be regex, there's going to be glob. And if each one of them has a different way of saying what becomes the value, then you have to learn each different way.
And I think it only works well in regex where you could name the field. But if you have like label names in your log FMT, for example, then are you going to start writing your logs to comply to this? Probably not, right? Maybe you're not even in control of that. And so being consistent everywhere.
Okay. So we drop the fact that value always become the label value always become the sample. Instead, we explicitly tell which one it is.
Yeah.
I think we should
using
make
a function.
Yeah.
I like this because I don't like that we sort of made a magic keyword. I like this better.
Okay.
I mean, I remember when you first demoed me, I had to ask you, like, value is a special case here, right? Like, it's a magic label that means so.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what I wanted to discuss also during this meeting. Like, are everyone okay with saying that the label value becomes the sample? And I think it's more flexible if it's a function that you can where you can select the label itself.
And here again, like it becomes super clear at this point, we're switching from like processing logs to processing values and metrics, essentially.
Yeah, the two examples that we have here, although they are not correct, right? Because you are still forced to use aggregation over time on top of the value function. Like it needs to be a sum over time or average over time. Or...
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be able to sum the value, is what you're saying, because it's
no.
I mean, technically you would. It wouldn't be meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't think you can, because it needs to be over time, right? You need to select a range. You cannot be for each step. You cannot be all the logs. Like it, I don't think it's meaningful.
Just as a heads up, I have a hard stop in 1 minute.
It would be meaningful in that you could apply Prometheus lookback rules. Sorry, it would be possible. It just wouldn't be meaningful.
Okay.
I think it's worth spending some time on this function because you're probably going to write it a lot. The value function.
Should job then.
Yeah.
Could just call it I.
There were one last subject I wanted to talk, so maybe we need to report because Frederick has a hard stop.
Yeah,
and it was merge by.
Yeah, let's do that next time. Cyril, can you update your proposal with this discussion?
Yeah.
And send it around, and then let's do this again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
awesome.
Cool. Let's
All
do
right.
that.
Thanks, Cyril.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a great week. Bye.
You too.